You ever made a decision and almost immediately realized that it was a bad call? Well, I certainly have, so I can relate. So stick around and let's talk about it. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalysts, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss the thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change. Well, we are in our third installment of our leadership mini series, and today we are discussing failures and what we learn from them. For the purpose of this particular podcast, we are going to define failure as falling short of our goal, our objective, or even our own personal standard. And I want to say right from the start that failing is just something that happens, whether it's by omission or commission. And failure is the result of that thing that has occurred. You are not a failure because you have failed at something. It does not define you, nor does it characterize who you are. So we want to make sure that we do not walk away thinking that we are a failure because we didn't accomplish something or achieve the purpose for that intended decision or action. Okay, so let's just get that clear. Failure is a very uncomfortable word. Um, it does not conjure up happy thoughts because I think that when you think about some of the things at which you have failed, it does not generally bring up good feelings, good thoughts. And that's probably just the very nature of the word. But I think failure, there's much for us to learn from failure. So we should become used to using the word and learning something from the actual failure, whether it's our own or other people's failures. Okay. When we look at failure in the leadership context, I think that there's an unspoken pressure that permeates the air. And this pressure causes us to think that we have to be right in just about everything. You have to be able to handle people, you have to know how to prioritize things, which are sometimes conflicting, and you have to be able to make right decisions at every point. Now, this could certainly just come down to organizational culture because some cultures do not leave room for failure. Or it could just be how we perceive things. And because we have a drive to do things and to get them done correctly or in the right way, we put this pressure on ourselves that we cannot fail. And if we do, it's going to be the end of everything. It'll be the end of our careers, it'll be the end of someone else's career, any number of things that could be applicable. And we have to get used to the fact that people are going to fail, and we certainly need to recognize that there are going to be instances where we fail, sometimes in a small way and sometimes in a major way. And how are we going to handle that? So then what does it look like if leadership is not always about being right? Well, maybe it comes down to how we handle being wrong. And really what this comes down to is accountability because nobody wants to be the person who shirks their responsibility and kind of puts it on other people. You want to be recognized as the one who, when it took the turn that it did, and maybe no one was expecting it, or maybe there was a chance that it would go the wrong way, that you just own it and you recognize, hey, based on the information that I had at the time, this is the reason why I made the decision. And this is the result. Maybe it couldn't have been helped. Maybe it could have. You would have to look at do a hindsight review to understand if there was something that could have been done differently. But the point is that it's a failure. And again, it doesn't define who you are, and it's not going to define where you can go as far as your career is concerned. Because there is a learning opportunity in every situation that occurs in our lives that does not turn out exactly as we planned it. Those things are actually there to help us. And I can remember even when I was a kid, my mom used to always say that she was a perpetual student. And when I was a kid, to me, what I always thought of was just a classical education. You're going to school, you're going to college, you're learning in the most traditional way. But when you look at that in the broader context, we should all be perpetual students, which means that there are always going to be things that we should learn. That we should take away. And failure is one of those things that is kind of like a flashing light that says, oh, well, you probably really need to pay attention to this because this is something that could have a significant impact on you, regardless of where you are in your career. So look at it this way. If humility is a teacher, then failure is the study room, which means you should take the time to look at your failures and see, well, what does it say about my character? How did I respond? Was I upset and angry? Was I humble and receptive to maybe some of the feedback that might have poured in the light of that failure? And some of these failures that occur in our lives are public. And by public, if someone other than a diehard confidant knows about it, that's then it's public. Or sometimes these are just things that we know for ourselves and no one else is really aware that a failure took place. And maybe it's not something that's so major that it impacts someone else because maybe this is your own standard that you didn't meet. Whatever the case may be, you would have to be the one to judge how big a failure that is in the context in which you find yourself. But it's still something that should be able to teach you a lesson so that you recognize that if I see these similar signs going forward, I can think back on this and I can apply what I learned from that former situation to the current situation that I'm facing today. And that's how important it is because if you're finding that you're not able to learn and your first response is to become angry and upset and not listen to anything or anyone, well, then you've closed yourself off and you might be stunning your own growth. And this is something that you don't want to do. And it makes it very difficult to have a working relationship with you if that's the route that you travel. So take a step back because it does hurt when you fail at something and when you have to call it what it is. It can be hurtful, but you don't have to stay in that place and you don't have to dwell there. And I have several instances, more than several, but I'm going to just share a couple of instances with you today because these might not be major failures. I would still categorize them as such because they impacted someone else. And so, in one particular instance, I was fairly new to a team and we were in the throes of budget. We had some competing priorities and deadlines that were going on, and both internal and external things that had to be reported. And there was a person on my team who had fallen ill immediately and could not finish his work while we were in the throes of all of these things. And so I had to send him home. And he asked about the work. Well, how what about it? How am I going to get this done? Okay, don't worry about it. We'll get you covered. Well, turns out that I overpromised and I underdelivered. And I disappointed him and I disappointed myself. And in my opinion, that was a failure because I had assured him that we were going to be able to carry on and pick up the load. And we were not able to do so. And I had to own that and I had to explain to him the situation and clarify for him. And I did. I apologized to him. But still, what I took away from that is you can't always do what you want to do in a particular situation. And maybe I could have done that differently. I think that I could have, quite frankly. But it that's what happened. And he didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel good about it, but at least I was able to own it and be accountable for it and make an apology and let him know, hey, you won't have this situation occur again. It won't happen again. I will shoot straight with you in the future. That way we'll be transparent with one another. You will know what to expect from me. I will know what to expect from you. And we were able to move past it. And it's not a situation where even it was about people pleasing. It was just about delivering on what I had promised and then not being able to do so. And I can recall even a colleague shared a story with me about an interaction that he had had with his leader. And there was some acquisition taking place uh, at this point in time. And I guess according to this acquisition, there were some things that were supposed to be conveyed and communicated that did not take place, and he didn't get to set up these newly acquired locations into their system. Well, when it was discovered that that had not happened, the leader got upset and was playing the blame game and basically was preparing to write a formal disciplinary action upon this guy. And he was just incredulous that he would be written up for something that he was completely unaware of. He thought that it was the leader's responsibility to communicate that information to him. And from the leader's perspective, it appeared as if he thought that this guy was supposed to know that since we're acquiring these locations, this is what he was supposed to have done. Well, there was a breakdown nonetheless, but it appeared that the leader did not even try to own any role that he played in this scenario, and it left a bad taste in this guy's mouth. And he tells this story today as if it happened last week. That's how incredulous he is about it. This is the type of impact that our actions have on other people, especially when we're serving in a role as a leader. People can see you as a leader without the title, but when you have the title, it kind of drives home that this is something that you should or should not do, and you're not living up to it, and therefore you're a failure. Well, sometimes it is as cut and dry as that, and other times it's not. But it behooves us to take ownership for our actions and not to point the finger at other people. And these are, like I said, just some minor examples, but there are things in your own life that you've either experienced or you've seen in the lives of other leaders, and it just did not work out, and you know details about the situation, and what you're hearing might not even line up with what you've seen. You do not garner support from people when you shun accountability. And owning our failures and learning from them, it could actually make a world of difference in your life and how far you go within your career. So then, what are some of the actions that we can do to avoid some of the mistakes that would kind of lead us to making some failures down the road? And again, the point is not necessarily to avoid failure altogether because there's so much to be learned. The point is to have an awareness about what we're doing and why we're doing it so that we can make sound decisions. And I think that most of us recognize that if everything if comes to you very easily or you're always successful, it can build a spirit of pridefulness and haughtiness, which is not going to suit you well as a leader. And sometimes failures are designed to help us remain in a humble position so that we can remain teachable, which is definitely what we want to do. So one of the things that we can do to kind of help us out is slow down and assess the situation. You would be surprised at what 5 minutes alone in the quiet can do for you to help you decompress and just think through a scenario that you're facing. And again, if it's a high stress, high stakes situation, you might require more than that. And sometimes 5 minutes might be difficult to come by if you're in a fast paced environment, but you at least need to take a few minutes to just think through some things, ask some clarifying questions, because that should always be at the top of your list when you're doing a review or assessing something, and just take in what you can so that you can try to make some really good and sound decisions. Number two, if you report to someone, which most of us do unless you're at the top, then ask for guidance, especially if you're new to your role. Again, going back to that point that I made about this this pressure that's kind of in the air. Well, if you report to someone, you should be able to go and have a conversation with them about whatever the scenario is that you're facing at work, and ask, "Hey, well, what do you know about this? Or what were you thinking? This is what I was thinking." Collaboration is key. So, and if you can't do it with the person to whom you report, maybe do it with some of your colleagues. Maybe they have some information that would help you to assess where you stand. But my point is that you want to reach out and ask for assistance when it's necessary, and that's actually a good sign when you do that. Number three, follow through on your commitments. And if you're unable to do so, communicate that as early as you are aware that you will not be able to deliver on whatever the promise or the agreement is. That is going to go a long way with building trust with people if they recognize that you are a straight shooter. And as soon as you recognize that the circumstances changed, you were willing and eager to share that information with you, even though you didn't like what the result might turn out to be. And then number four, avoid making excuses. Now, this one might assume that the failure has already occurred, or even maybe a mistake that could have led up to a failure has already occurred. But what you don't want to do is pretend like you don't play any role in whatever this situation is. Just own it. Don't be embarrassed. Don't run and hide. Own it. And think clearly through how you're going to present information if you're called to, I guess, account for it, because in some situations you might be called to account for it, and in other situations maybe you won't be. It just depends, and you know your environment better than I do. But you don't want to look as if you never own what you do, because people won't trust you, and you want people to trust you. You want people to be able to look to you and say, hey, I know that we can involve Shanita, and she's going to shoot straight with us. She's going to talk through it with us, and she's going to think through it, and whatever it is. But you don't want to look as if you never do anything wrong or incorrect, I should say, because that I don't want to say wrong as a connotation. So then ultimately, we find ourselves looking at failure not as the end, but as a new chance to do something differently. There's always something to be learned in every circumstance that we meet with. The question is, how will you respond to it? Because it's really up to you. A lot of you may be in a situation where you feel like you're not supported when failures occur. And maybe you haven't felt the brunt of that, but maybe you've seen it in other people. This is what I would say to you: be confident and comfortable in who you are, recognizing that you have come forth to do the very best that you know how in those moments, because you only live today once. You only know what you know up through today as of this moment. So the decisions that you make, the things that you do and commit to, there's going to be only this set of circumstances at that particular point in time. The best that you can do is be accountable for it, talk it through, learn from it, and apply it in future situations. And hopefully you won't have a similar situation that comes up, and so that you repeat technically that failure, because that's not what you want to do. But you want to show that you can learn from everything that you've encountered, including the failures, and that you're not afraid to fail. And I just recently heard, I was watching a basketball game, only a portion because I'm not a sports enthusiast by any stretch, but even when it came down to throwing shots in basketball, I heard one of the sportscasters say, "Well, you can't be afraid to fail. Even if you miss the shot, you still have to go for it." And that's what I'm telling you. You still have to go for it. So now it's your turn. What is it? What is one lesson that you've learned the hard way? And how have you been able to turn that around and apply it and make it work for you? Because that's really what we want to do. You have the ability to do it, others have the ability to do it. And I want you to remember that other people, they're human just like you. They have failures that they're struggling with just like you. So when you see other people fail, maybe there's something for you to learn from their failures, and maybe there's something for them to learn through yours. But just remember that we're all human and we're all trying our very best, because we're not coming to work to fail. We're coming to work to succeed. And the failures occur along the way, but they should make us better. Okay? So, if you have a story in relation to failure, I would love to hear about it. So send an email to me at theshanita.brown@gmail.com. And also give me a like and a subscribe. And if you feel so inclined, leave a comment and or a review. I would really appreciate it. And since we have come to the end of our show, I want you to know that crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. Talk to you next week.